Greetings. I'm really glad you're here. This episode is a sequel to episode 6, but you don't have to stop and go back and listen to 6 first. We'll be talking about haunted hotels and discuss a couple of different locations and some personal experiences people have had while staying at hotels that seem to have permanent residents. While some people try to avoid any place that could be haunted, I actually make as many haunted stops as I can during my trips and vacations. One of the best trips my wife and I took was to Monterey, California. We had been to Monterey numerous times before, which included the standard visits to the aquarium and strolls along Cannery Row, but this trip would be a little different. We booked our room in the old Monterey Hotel, which is located downtown and inland a few blocks from the Fisherman's Wharf. As you may have guessed, the hotel is reported to have been haunted. I wouldn't have it any other way. The Monterey Hotel is located at 406 Alvarado Street and was built in 1904. The hotel has kept a great deal of the original and architectural feel. The lobby is appointed with crystal chandeliers and antique furniture. The old elevator doesn't work, so be prepared to lug your luggage upstairs if that's where your room is. But let's get to why you're here. You probably want to hear about the paranormal, so let's talk about the ghosts of the Monterey Hotel. The ghost most often referred to is called Fred by the staff, and he was supposedly a handyman who died at the hotel many years ago. Some people believe Fred still maintains a strong presence at the hotel and likes to mess with the guests when he can. It's said that Fred was killed during a freak elevator accident, and that the elevator is still non-functional as a result. The tale goes on that he likes to hang out in room 217 and will turn off the radio and television while you're in there. When we went to the hotel, we couldn't get into room 217, and we were given a room on the 3rd floor. We stayed for 2 nights, and while I didn't experience anything that could be really considered paranormal evidence, we did have an unusual experience. Our room had a ceiling fan. It was controlled by one of those old-fashioned buttons that you push to turn it on and push to turn it off. Our first night there, we returned after dinner and we made sure the fan was on before we went to bed. It was summer and it was a bit stuffy and warm in the room. An apparently popular and very noisy bar was located downstairs and outside of our room, so we couldn't leave the window open. Even with the window closed, it was still pretty loud. Once the street and bar noise settled down, we finally started to drift off to sleep. About 3 a.m., I woke up feeling a little warm and sweaty, and it was then that I noticed that the ceiling fan was off. At first, I thought we were in the middle of a power outage or something, but noticed that the LED on the clock radio was still working, so that wasn't it. I climbed out of bed and pushed the button, and the ceiling fan started again. I didn't think too much about it and went back to bed. About 30 minutes later, I woke up again and discovered the fan was off. My first thought was, what the hell's wrong with the switch? I got up, turned it on again. This time the fan stayed on until about 5:30 a.m. That's when I woke up again. The ceiling fan was motionless. I got up, turned it back on, and it stayed on this time till about 9 a.m. when we got up. The first thing I did after waking up was confirm with my wife that she hadn't been on some kind of an anti-ceiling fan rampage in the middle of the night. She hadn't, and like me, had been wondering why the fan kept going off. I inspected the buttons, and it was a pretty simple affair. Again, push it to turn it on, push the other button to turn it off. Didn't appear to be any kind of timers in the switch, just buttons. I thought it was interesting that the fan would turn off after varying amounts of time. It would be anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours. The next day, we stopped by the hotel desk and asked the girl to tell me about Fred. She looked as if I had invited the devil into the hotel. She lowered her voice and said, "We're not allowed to talk about that. We'll get fired if we do." I certainly didn't want anybody to get fired, so I thanked her for her time and returned to the hotel room. Of course, the fan was off again. Half joking, I said out loud, "Hey, Fred, would you mind not turning off our fan?" I don't know if it had anything to do with it or not, but the fan remained on throughout the rest of the night. Maybe Fred was conserving electricity, or maybe the old wiring caused the fan to stop working from time to time. Other ghosts are also reported at the Monterey Hotel. A young girl has been seen sitting on the stairs, and a man with a top hat has been seen in one of the old mirrors. It could be that people are just expecting to see such things in an old historic building. The town has its share of ghostly sightings, many of which are attached to the old historic buildings in town, some of which date back to the 1700s when some of the first Spanish explorers landed in the bay. As far as Fred goes, I couldn't find any accounts of anyone dying in the Monterey Hotel elevator. I'd read a lot of old newspaper articles about the hotel. If someone wrote a bad check at the hotel, it was in the newspaper, so I'm sure something as newsworthy as a man being killed by an elevator would have been published. That doesn't mean that the ghost has to be a past employee. Many people feel that the architect who designed the Monterey Hotel, William Weeks, is the main spirit at large there. Personally, I haven't spent enough time at the hotel to be sure, and I'm not convinced that there are any ghosts at the old hotel. But I haven't had the experiences that others have had, so I'll leave that as still a possibility. By the way, if you ever do spend a night or two in Monterey, I have to recommend taking the Monterey Ghost Trolley Tour. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, the tour is absolutely fascinating and takes you to some extremely interesting and historic places. There are plenty of hotels all over that don't seem to exude a lot of history. You know, just your standard 2 or 3-star hotels or motels with, the coffee maker in the bathroom, and if you're lucky, a window that actually opens. Nothing you would perceive as spooky or even historic. Remember, though, that even though a hotel may not have any real history itself, the land on which it sits more than likely does. I did one investigation at a hotel off of Highway 101, where the long-term tenants reported a variety of activity in their rental unit. The hotel was built in the 1970s, but the land sat right in the middle of what was once the largest coastal Miwok villages in the West. Not only that, but a conflict between Mexican soldiers and early settlers also took place in the area on June 11, 1846. The short 26-day, but important battle was later called the Bear Flag Revolt, named after the flag that was raised by settlers proclaiming independence from Mexico. The point is, even though there may not be any history connected to the hotel to validate paranormal activity, there is still going to be history. Over time, people tend to gather, build towns and cities on the same spots as people from the past. Native American villages situated in prime locations, maybe on high ground or near good hunting or fishing grounds. Then along come settlers, and the natives move out, and the settlers would see the same benefits of the location as the natives. Oftentimes, ancient great civilizations are found built upon multiple other civilizations. Today, many of our modern highways were once wagon trails. So, if ghosts are connected to the essence of people who have died, you never know where you might experience a ghost. It may not even be connected to long past spirits, but possibly even the ghost of something more recent. Take, for example, the case of my friend Tom, a retired police officer who has served as a homicide detective and investigator for the district attorney's office. Tom is an analytical kind of guy. It takes facts and evidence to convince him of anything. And anyone who believed in ghosts was probably some kind of loon. Needless to say, Tom didn't believe in ghosts, and as such, didn't often think about them. When one of Tom's kids went away to college in Santa Barbara, he and his wife would make regular trips to visit. It was common for them to stay at different hotels near the college. As a result, they got to experience lots of different views and sections of the California coast. They had a regular routine during their trips and found comfort in these routines. One of these trips provided to be a real shock to Tom and changed his views on the paranormal forever. The family found a new hotel they wanted to stay in and checked in. It wasn't really a new hotel, but it's simply one that they hadn't been at before. It was a rather nondescript group of buildings, 3 stories high, built on the edge of a coastal cliff. It was quiet, clean, and comfortable. After going out to dinner, the family returned to their room and started getting settled in. They got comfortable and prepared for one of their favorite family activities, reading in bed. Tom got into bed and his wife and younger children got into the second bed in the room. Tom was propped up, leaning back against the headboard with his book positioned just below eye level. He had been reading for less than a minute when he became aware of some motion near the room's door. As he looked up, he immediately saw a young woman. He watched as she quickly walked from the door from right to left, out towards the balcony door on their room. You can imagine this came as quite a shock to Tom. His mind was reeling, trying to explain what he was seeing. There was no doubt in his mind that some girl had walked into their room. Then he realized that he never heard the door open or close. He also didn't hear the sliding glass door to the balcony open or close. His logical thought process was in high gear as he jumped out of bed. As he did, he was asking his family if they had just seen the girl. They all looked up from their books and stared at him as if he had 3 heads. Not wanting her to get away, he rushed to the balcony, but there was no one there. He checked the front door and it was still locked. Tom said the girl did not look like a ghost. She looked like a real, solid person. He was now worried that this may have been the precursor to some kind of room invasion robbery. He grabbed his pistol and checked outside the room, but found no evidence of anything suspicious going on. Running out of options, his next thought was maybe this was one of those hotel rooms that someone had put peepholes and some weird malfunction in the camera had projected an image of the girl in the room. Tom began pulling pictures off the wall and checking for holes or lenses behind them. He didn't find anything unusual. The event had really caused Tom a lot of anguish. He had always had that scientific mind and never believed in ghosts. Even his religious faith had waned over the years because of how he perceived conflicts between science and religion. He found some credibility in the intelligent design theories, but not ghosts. As most logical people would, his next rationale was that he might have just experienced some kind of hallucination. This made even less sense because Tom had never experienced a hallucination in his life, and there was no reason he would experience one now. Even a hallucination born out of a dream was not likely. Tom had always found it hard to go to sleep, and he was sure he had not fallen asleep and dreamed this event. He had only been in bed maybe 20 seconds or so when the girl walked by. Not only that, but he was still convinced that he had seen a real, solid girl. Tom and I were sitting in a local restaurant as he shared this story with me. Tom pointed out one of the waitresses and said, "See that girl with the dark hair? She looked a lot like her." Tom pulled up his shirt sleeve and pointed to the goosebumps on his arm. Seeing that girl and remembering this story gives me the chills. Tom remembered every detail of the Phantom Girl and said that if she walked into that restaurant, he would know her. She was dressed in some kind of thick black jumpsuit, possibly even a wetsuit. He recalled that she had something resembling a dark backpack on her back. He had the impression that she may have been dressed like a scuba diver. He remembers her as having very dark hair, and she reminded him of a college girl walking briskly to class. He felt that she had no awareness that he or his family was even there. As our visit progressed, we talked less about ghosts and more about some of our past exploits and friends at the police department. When we parted ways, I asked Tom to send me some more specifics as to the location and date of his encounter, and we said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. That evening, I started doing some research. I didn't really expect to find much based on the description. I figured I didn't have to look any later than about the 1950s. After about 10 minutes, I came across an article from 1954 reporting that a mother was suing over the death of her daughter in a diving accident. Eva Ruth Lewin died October 9th, 1954. Eva died at the age of 21 just off of Santa Barbara's coast. According to the article, her rubber suit had failed in some way and cut off her air supply. This was a very loose connection at best. To date, there are no photos available of Eva, so we don't even know if she matches the description, and we're not even sure how close the hotel lies to the place where Eva lost her life. That being said, it's still a very gripping piece of information. I contacted Tom and shared with him what I had discovered, and to my surprise, Tom was not particularly happy with the discovery, as it only served to shake his world that much more. He did make an interesting observation and asked, "What if her death was suspicious and she showed herself to me as some kind of way to ask for help?" I had already wondered the same thing, and a really interesting piece of information came to my attention later that week. I found a brief footnote in a different article that seemed to indicate the county coroner in 1954 also thought something was suspicious and was digging deeper into her case. Unfortunately, that's where the story ends for now. I cannot find any more information on Eva's case, and I may have to wait till I get to Santa Barbara so I can look at some hard copy records. If you've been following this series, you may have noticed a trend with all my stories. As strange as they are, there's a non-paranormal explanation available for each one, usually. What I find interesting is how many of these stories are out there. And they're not limited to fantasy-oriented people, but can affect anyone when they least expect it. It's strange how so many people experience the same kinds of events, whether or not they believe in ghosts or not. I suspect that ever since man first stood upright, spirits and ghosts were standing right there next to him or her. whatever the source for these events are, we should also embrace them as part of our human experience. Thank you so much for listening. I enjoy sharing these stories with you, and if you like my podcast, please share them with friends and family. You can also visit my website, outsidetheveil.com, and see additional documents and photos that go with each episode. Again, thanks for listening. And the next time you come by, I'll be waiting here, outside the veil.